Alright, we're doing another tier list video, this time talking about combo decks within Classic. I'm using the same criteria as before, so going through every single class, taking the best combo deck that they have, and then I'm judging it based on if you were to play that deck for the whole season, where do I think you would end up on ladder with it. But I want to talk a little bit about combo decks before we get too into it. We're not talking OTKs. It's really just anything that's 2 or more cards is going to be used to close out a game. So that means things like Savage Roar with Force of Nature, obviously, very common combo, but it's just 2 cards. And for some stuff here, you're going to see the ability to just force a combo in rather than build it around the combo. Leroy Jenkins and Faceless Manipulator, 2 of the most popular cards used to finish your opponent as a combo. It deals 12 damage, and yeah, your Force of Nature Savage Roar is dealing 14 from hand. Even like Cruel Taskmaster, Grom, I don't think a lot of people think of it as a combo. That's just 12. So even just having, Leroy Faceless jammed into any class, any deck, it's only 2 cards that maybe don't fit into it. And it's technically a combo, so we're going to have to work with that as far as what decks we're going to be talking about here. And that's why I think there is just nothing that's real terrible. Combos are so good. Charge is such a good keyword that, there's no class that suffers so much that you can't just put in Leroy and Faceless Manipulator. But that's where I think we get the Paladin. And Paladin, first off, what does it look like? What is your combo Paladin? Because you can try to make something that leans more heavily into the combo archetype, with crazy draw like Gadget's Hand and Blessing of Wisdom, all that kind of stuff. But really, I think the most effective combo to run is something like Leroy, a single Blessing of Might, and Faceless Manipulator. It's going to be 10 mana. It's going to push out 18 damage, which is significant. It's just that those cards don't often fit into a deck together normally. So I think the best thing to do is you just go with a mid-range, or you go with a Control Paladin, and then you go ahead and you put those things in. If you're going with a Control Paladin, Faceless has other targets within the list. It's already kind of an okay include to begin with. Blessing of Might does a bit better in something like mid-range, where you're already dropping those bubbles. So one of those cards in the combo, already going to have some value, maybe belongs in the deck to begin with. And then, the other 2, you're just jamming them in, hoping for a bit of burn right at the end there. And, the thing is, Paladin is just not a great deck to begin with. You're not generally going to want to ladder with Control or mid-range Paladin. They're okay. You can do reasonably well. You can get to Legend. But as soon as you start jamming stuff like this in, it's not going to help your cause. It doesn't really work with it. So I think that gives us the worst combo deck in Hearthstone Classic. And right above that, I'm going Priest. Now, what is the combo for Priest? There's 2 that I think come to mind for most people. The one would be some sort of Inner Fire combination. You can get like Stormwind Knight and beef it up to, I think it's like a 28-28 and charge it in. I don't recommend that one. I actually think the better combo is going to be a Velen Mind Blast combo. If you can get that Holy Smite in there, that's 14 damage as well. There is a bit of a question, I think, as to whether or not you run 2 Mind Blasts or just the 1. But I think if you're going for this archetype, it actually looks like Shadow Form, Velen, 1 or 2 Mind Blasts, and then you've got your Holy Smites, which are just kind of good anyway. The Velen inclusion it's maybe not as good as some of those other high-end minions, your Rag and Cairn and Sylvanas, even Alex. But at 7 mana, you're actually able to use it with things like your hero power, especially if you've included Shadow Form in the deck, to get reasonable value. It could be heals, it could be removing a minion on board. It's kind of like a mini targetable Rag in that sense. But the thing is, Priest isn't that great to begin with, so you're starting from a Control archetype, you're putting these kinds of combo pieces in. not great, does okay damage. If you've got coin, you know, there's this really small chance you hold it into the late game, and you can double Mind Blast to deal like 20 points of damage, which is real nice. But yeah, obviously very, very unlikely to happen. Mind Blast is not the worst card though, in my mind. I just think it struggles because Priest struggles a lot. And you can use it in desperate times with a Wild Pyromancer to sometimes clear some of the smaller minions from the board. So overall, I actually don't think it hurts Control Priest that much to lean into it. But again, a deck that wasn't that good to begin with and gets a little bit worse. Right above that, I've got Shaman. So what is this Shaman combo looking like? I think the best combo Shaman, take your standard mid-range Shaman, and then you put in a Leroy and a Wind Fury. And what you end up doing is you have this deck that has this potential to be a crazy burstable combo. It could be Leroy, Wind Fury, Flame Tongue Totem, and double Rock Biter. And what is that? That's like 6. You get 8 with the Flame Tongue. I think it's 28 damage if I'm counting correctly for 10 mana. But it's one of those things where Flame Tongue Totem is good on its own. Rock Biter is good on its own, right? You would include those in the deck anyway. Wind Fury, not great on its own. But you can still win the odd game by tossing it on like a fire elemental, sometimes even just a small totem with a flame tongue, and it'll just end up being the little bit of extra damage that you need. So you're putting in, I would say, 2 cards that really don't belong. I do think the deck suffers a pretty significant amount having done it. It's cool that you can pull off these crazy big combos, but I actually don't think it really helps that much in terms of win rates versus stuff that you would want it to help with. For example, it gives you a ton of damage to send at something like a warrior that can have a ton of health. But the thing is, mid-range Shaman is already great against warriors, so you kind of just don't care. It's already good against Druid, something else that has heals and stuff in there. So I just find, yeah, it's the best combo. It doesn't detract too much from the deck, but it kind of feels like 2 dead cards a lot of the time. You're just going to hurt your win rate. It's not going to help in a lot of the other matchups that you already struggled with, like Zoo, for example. But that's the direction I would go if I was doing any kind of combo Shaman. Above that, we've got a few here, and let's start with Mage. I don't think any controversy here in Mage. Freeze Mage, probably one of the most common combo decks that you would see on ladder. Very, very good against aggro. It's good against Miracle Rogue, but polarizing matchups. It's so good against aggro, but it's so bad against Control Warrior. And still, I hate to say it, but we're running into all these Control Warrior bots, at least at a lot of points on the ladder. But if you're going to play through a whole season, you're going to run into a bunch of them. At least until you get to Legend. And that's significantly going to drop your win rate. But even then, if we're just talking humans, there's a decent number of people playing Control Warrior, and it's probably single-digit percentage chance to win. But of course, if you don't know the combo, this is a bit of a unique combo deck. It's not just... First of all, it's not just a single combo, because there's so many cards that do so much stuff to help here. That, yeah, you don't need a particular set of cards every single game to push it out. But the other thing is, it's kind of hard to tell where the combo begins and ends, because you can make an argument that this is like a multi-turn combo deck. So you're doing things like putting up an ice block to make sure you don't die, using Alexstrasza to drop them to 15 health, and then using whatever burn you have in your hand, whether it's fireballs, frostbolts, ice lance, whatever, to deal that 15 points of damage. Games often deviate from that, though. Sometimes you're using Alex defensively. Sometimes you don't need that ice block to set up for a play. Sometimes you've just dealt a little bit of damage, or maybe they've tapped because they're a handlock or a zoo, and then you just have the burst available, maybe with something like a Thalnos, or you get mana reduction from Sorcerer's Apprentice. It's crazy. Everything just working in tons of different synergies. but you probably experienced it out there on ladder. Very, very good. You can climb very high. It really is just that control warrior that holds us back from being like an S tier deck. But yeah, Mage, pretty good. Warrior, what are we talking about for combo? Like I said, Grom and Taskmaster, it is a combo. It deals 12 damage, right? It's no different than Faceless and Leroy. So there is an argument to make that that's a combo deck. I don't know why. It just doesn't feel like it. But there's Worgen OTK as well. And I think Worgen OTK, although I would put it a little bit below Control Warrior, I think it's still a very effective deck. If you take the time to learn it and practice it and master it, you can do almost as well, maybe about as well as you would do with the Control Warrior. So it's almost not even an issue as to which one you were going to pick as the best combo deck. But I want to talk more about Worgen OTK just because, well, it feels like more of a combo deck. So with that, you've generally got this game plan with a extremely strong draw engine and a bunch of board removal tools. So you're using things like Brawl, Whirlwind. I've seen different variations of it. Your Executes, Shield Slams to remove minions very, very efficiently, something that Warrior does very well. You can do that with weapons as well. And then, yeah, everything else is just there to draw, to cycle very, very fast. Your Novice Engineers, Loot Hoarders, Acolyte of Pain. And sometimes people even go with Battle Rage is another way to draw a bit more. Cold Lights is an option. And you're able to put out, I believe, the full combo. It's like Raging Worgen. You're going to charge it. You can inner rage, like double inner rage, double rampage, like upwards of that much. It's something like 32 damage. I'm not going to do the math now. But yeah, it can be a full OTK, but you don't always need that as well, right? Those pieces still work as just partial little, partial pieces to a puzzle, I guess. So you've got a Worgen with maybe a single inner rage, and maybe you have a Taskmaster in hand, and a single rampage with charge, and that's like 24 damage or something crazy like that. So because you don't always need that, the list can sometimes be shaped a bit differently to be a little bit more aggressive to deal some of that damage, not expect it to be a full OTK, and instead just be a combo of sort of whatever you need. Stuff like that tends to run like Frothing Berserkers, maybe even Korkrons as well. The weapons can go face as opposed to just for removal, but otherwise it's just going to be a matchup-based decision. So if you're playing against someone like a Zoo player, well, they're going to be hurting themselves, not caring too much about their health. There's no heals, things like that. Yeah, you don't need a full 32 points of damage or whatever it is. You might just need 18 or 20 from a Worgen. So with that, yeah, you don't have to draw as aggressively. You're probably playing the board mitigation game a little more heavily, and that's kind of where you're at. So yeah, a lot to do with Warrior there, however you want to start to draw the lines and everything with combo. But there is a lot to explore. It is a good deck. Very high skill cap. I think it's something you really need to practice to see just how well it does. That's going to move us on to Hunter. And I think you probably saw me scroll up and you're like, Hunter, really? This is where it gets a little bit weird. I'm a little back and forth on this one too, because this gets into like the Control Warrior territory. The Control Hunter I like to run has Leroy and Faceless Manipulator, but they're not really there specifically as a finisher. In fact, Leroy is just a great finisher on its own, and he's great in combination with Unleash the Hounds, which is also going to be in your deck, but you're not always using him as a finisher even then. If you use him in combination with Unleash the Hounds, well, you can take out the whelps that you play, send 6 damage to the opponent's face, and then force them to actually deal with Leroy. The Faceless Manipulator works really great with Deadly Shot and Freezing Trap, sometimes even Hunter's Mark, because you can Faceless, usually an enemy's minion. You don't have too many high value minions in your deck, usually just high mains. Sometimes people include Rag. But you can do it on an opponent's minion, say like a rag, and then deadly shot it in the same turn. You end up with a rag, and theirs is gone for 8 mana. Very, very efficient form of removal, and you're leaning into that control style of things. But that combo is always there. I've won off of it before. It is 12 damage. 12 damage is not insignificant, and the fact that you're whittling them down with your hero power usually means that 12 damage is actually quite a bit to push right at the end of the game. You've also got the ability to pull that combo more consistently because you've got tracking in the deck. So if you've got one piece of the combo, when you play tracking, it's very appealing to take the second, especially in particular matchups. If you're against something like a warrior, you feel like you're going to need that extra burst right at the end of the game. It's pretty good. But yeah, basically just 2 cards that I think fit very, very well into an already very good deck. You're not generally playing them as a combo. So this gets away from the feeling of a combo deck. It doesn't feel like it because most games you're not going to end it with that combo. But it's just so nice that you can play a standard kind of control game all the way through, and then it's like, oh, well, here's another 12 damage I'll finish my opponent off with. So it feels a little weird to include it this high, but it felt worse in my gut to knock it down any further because, well, I know it's a good deck, and I know the combo exists within it. That's going to bring us to the best of the best, the top, the S tier combo decks. And I don't think any surprise, Miracle Rogue is going to be on top. Best deck in the game. It's got an extremely strong combo. That's also another one where you don't need every single piece to make it work. So Leroy Double Shadow Step is 8 mana and 18 damage. You can potentially drop a couple Cold Bloods on there. You've always got a chance to Eviscerate instead, or in tandem if you've got a prep as well. So a lot of versatility in the combo, but yeah, it's a deck that draws crazy, crazy well. It's a deck that pushes tons and tons of damage at the end of the game, however you kind of decide to slice it, and I don't think we really need to talk about it that much more. Miracle Rogue, gonna get you to the top of the ladder. Craziest combo in the game. But it's a good transition over to Druid, which I would say is the second craziest combo in the game. Extremely annoying to play against. Force of Nature, Savage Roar, 14 damage straight from hand. Potentially more if there's anything else sitting on the board. And it gets even crazier because, first of all, Wild Growth can get you to that mana quicker. So it might not even be turn 9 that you're playing it. It could be something like turn 7, turn 8 where you're playing it. Innervate can make you play it even quicker, sometimes in tandem with Wild Growth, which means it can be coming out on turn 5 or turn 6. And then the most annoying, Innervate, Force of Nature with double Savage Roar. What is that? 22 damage straight from hand. There's so much to play around here, and this combo can even be used as just a board removal tool, right? Able to take out like a rag and another minion, or a rag and a little bit of extra damage. I think that's a fairly common scenario. And whether they have the combo or not, you're constantly having to think, am I at 14 health? That's the first breakpoint. 15 health because they could innervate hero power on top of it. And then, yeah, 22 health. Am I even safe there? You can't let anything stay on the board, right? It forces you to be so aggressive in your removal of Druid's minions, which is not easy. Very, very strong combo deck. And yeah, it's one of these decks where you don't need the combo to win. Sometimes you just play a bunch of big bodies and that's enough to completely demolish your opponent. Or maybe you just use a single Savage Roar because your board happened to be pretty big a certain turn because you were able to play Innervates or Wild Growths early in the game. It's crazy. Very, very strong combo deck. You're going to end up high on ladder. I don't think it's the best for getting to rank 1 on ladder just because so many people play Druid that it just becomes this mirror match city. But yeah, very, very strong deck. You'll end up very high in Legend if you stick with it through a whole season. And then finally, it's Handlock. Handlock is going to be Warlock's best combo deck. And there's a few different ways to make it. There's like a very combo heavy list, which usually runs like Arcane Golem, Leroy, double Power Overwhelming, double Faceless Manipulator. And that's just like, I really want to make sure I draw a charger and a way to copy it and send as much damage at my opponent as possible. So of course, right, if you get the Arcane Golem with double Power Overwhelming and a Faceless, you're looking at 24 points of damage in a single turn. But again, you don't always need that, so get a Leroy with a Power Overwhelming and copy it, or an Arcane Golem with the single copy of Power Overwhelming. It's like 16 or 20 damage. All very good ways to end the game. But you don't always have to lean into it that heavily. You can also just go with Leroy, 1 or 2 Faceless, and then a couple Power Overwhelmings as well. You don't need the Arcane Golem. So your maximum potential for damage is 20, but you're kind of saying, well, I want to be a more control-y style, and I want a little more versatility out of those other cards. So Power Overwhelming, very useful in conjunction with Shadow Flame. Beef a minion up, then Shadow Flame it, deal a ton of damage across the board. You can play that on something like an Owl, and you'll wipe just about everything that your opponent has. There's the odd case where you're going to push damage for lethal on like a Twilight Drake or something like that, or just force kind of a favorable trade. Doesn't happen too often, but it does have that versatility. Leroy is also versatile with Shadow Flame, and we even saw it in the tournament this past week. Do it a lot on ladder, where you just play Leroy, deal the 6 damage, and then use Shadow Flame because he's got 6 attack. You're going to take care of the whelps, and you're going to take care of everything else that's on the board at the time. It's not really what you're hoping to do, but it's a nice kind of recovery tool if you need a way to sweep the board. And Faceless Manipulator, you've got tons of big minions in your deck. Even if you just get reasonable value out of your opponent's minions, like sometimes an early ramped out Druid minion could be a Yeti or a Druid of the Claw. Sometimes that's a fine target to copy if you just don't have anything else. Or yeah, you can target one of your own, potentially a Taunted Giant or just a Giant Drake, something like that. Becomes very, very annoying, especially if you can do a turn 4 play into a turn 5 copy. Really great. So because of that versatility, you know, all those cards kind of good on their own, great as part of a combo to finish your opponent off. And if I had to go one way or another, I would go for the more conservative control-y style where you just run Leroy. Yeah, 1 or 2 Faceless manipulators, I think is fine, and double Power Overwhelming. I really, really like that style. The very heavy combo-oriented style with Arcane Golem, it's fun, it's good, it's, I would say, almost as good, it's just slightly worse than the other. It's going to allow you to deal more burst very quickly, so if you're in an aggressive matchup, you don't have to do all this work to stabilize the board. It's going to do better against something like a Hunter, for example, that's just going to deal tons of damage through your taunts. Probably against a Mage, it's just going to close out the game a bit quicker before they can use all their burn on you. But I don't think that that's a compelling enough reason to actually go ahead and do that Arcane Golem combination, because I think the control style is just better across the board in every other matchup, which you're going to see a lot more of, and that's just going to make your win rate overall higher. So I think that's it. It's enough of combos, though I would be curious to hear about any other like crazy combos you guys can think of with these kinds of decks, because yeah, I know there's a lot of ways to cut it when it comes to combo decks. But overall, if you're a combo player, tons of things to choose from. You can certainly make a lot of these classes memeier, if you will, by putting in some pretty ridiculous combos in Classic. But yeah, hopefully somebody's pissed off. That's my tier list. Deal with it.